Now I have the pleasure of being joined by Syracuse lacrosse legend. He's now a recurring guest, four-time All-American, and mentor to many youth lacrosse players around the Northeast. It's Ric Beardsley. Ric, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Guys, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's trying to pin me down is tough, so I appreciate that, guys.
We know you're a busy guy, so we won't take up too much of your time, but let's just start. What are your impressions of this season for Syracuse so far, heading into Saturday's game against Notre Dame?
I mean, I think Syracuse is doing about the best job in the country of building this way, right? They're starting out getting to know each other, new defensive coordinator, bunch of new transfers in, and they've moved themselves perfect right up into what they're doing. And as Coach Simmons used to say, my old college coach, high school coach, good Lord, that's how old I am. He used to say he used to want to peak at the last minute of the last game, of the season. And that's what he always wanted. Because some guys, what he meant by that was some guys at the Final Four might peak, and then in a national championship, you're on your downfall. So I think Syracuse is on that, riding that upward curve and absolutely doing a great job of it. And I think the biggest thing that they've learned is that other than one guy contributing the majority of that offensive points, it's getting spread around a little, and that's still that one guy is the focal point, but it's really it's kind of like a how do I say, a gracious, or just a great way, a gracious way to spread the wealth, right? And that's usually the way it's going to go. I mean, Joey Spallina has been getting the number one guy. And that's been opening up a lot of things. And then he's also been getting some complimentary, goals and everything, and doing what he needs to do. So I think that balance is really good. I think that's where the continuity is. Because if you look at like Duke, for example, last two games with Duke, their offense has been out of sorts. And I think it's really because there's just no meshing. And in Syracuse's offense, there's a ton of meshing. And that has to happen. That's really, Dom Finn is killing me right now, guys. Former four-time All-American himself. I got to tell him right now, I'm on an interview on the Zoom, dude. Jeez. He's a Hall of Famer, my best buddy.
You're Mr. Popular, Ric. Everyone wants to talk to you.
Yeah, listen, when you're trying to put his club into a Nike contract, he's going to call you. But no, to get back to you, I think Syracuse has done an excellent job building to where they need to be. And he just put Zoom this. Sorry, guys. I know it's not the way an interview should go, but this is typically the way an interview goes with me. They're building towards, a goal, and I think they're continuing to build, bricks upon bricks, and I think they'll get there. I think they're on an upward trend, and hopefully it keeps going.
You mentioned the transfers, and when we talked to you last year, it was a roster filled with freshmen that were still kind of figuring it out. Those are now sophomores. You mentioned Joey Spallina, obviously Michael Leo, and the sorts. What do you think has been more key to the upward success that you mentioned this year? They bring in the transfers of Sam English, of Jake Stevens, and then, the faceoff guy, Mason Cone. Has it been the transfers, or do you think also the current freshman class and their development as sophomores has also contributed to that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, let's be honest. We can't anoint Syracuse as the best team in the country right now. There's several teams that could vie for that, right? Let's be honest about it. There's 5-6 teams that could easily be in a national championship game and sneak out with their first title, or their one that they haven't had in many years. I think it's a great blend, right? And why am I saying that? It's the teams that I won national championships with, guys. I was lucky enough to have won 2 in my day and played in 4 Final Fours and lost in a semi, and then lost in a national championship. And those teams that I lost with, those guys will admit that we weren't the most meshed team, right? And that is something that you have to do, because if winning a championship were easy, guys, as you know, being former athletes yourselves, right, at whatever level anybody was on this call, there's no difference. Winning a championship is difficult, and that's you have to have a lot of good things happen in order to win, and especially at the Division I level. I had really talented midfield of 3 Hall of Famers. The aforementioned Dom Finn, who called me, Charlie Lockwood is a Hall of Famer, and Roy Culsey, 3 of the best midfielders to ever come through college lacrosse. They were on the same midfield, along with 2 other midfielders that were All-Americans that year. and we lost in the semis. And it was because there was one ball for 4 guys, 5 guys. And, you can't have that. I think the unselfishness of the group right now has been its greatest attribute. And I think obviously defensively, they continue to grow. Like you said, they were freshmen, now they're sophomores, right? And a freshman at the end of the year is not a freshman. He's kind of like a freshman plus. So I think the mix of all of those things going on, obviously the transfer portal helps. Guys playing together for a little bit longer, that little experience with the inexperience. And then, it comes out to a pretty good equation.
So you were talking about midfield. You're a defensive guy, and I told you before. I was listening to you talk with Paulie and Steve on Orange Nation the other day, and you were talking about the importance of the defensive midfield. So I guess I'm really interested. Like, what exactly makes the defensive midfield so important? Because you got your long poles on the defensive end. What exactly makes your defensive midfield so important from like an X's and O's and what they're doing on the field type of perspective?
That's a great question. No one has ever answered that question. I've just been talking out of my ass to say that the best team with the best defensive midfield goes far. That's all I can tell. I can't even give you an answer. I don't know why. No, I'm kidding. The reason I think, okay, and that really is a great question because no one's ever asked it to me. I always say, hey, the team with the best rope unit or the best short stick defensive midfield unit or defensive midfield typically goes the furthest in the playoffs. It's the old adage of 2 things. The old adage is offense wins games, defense wins championships. The middle of the field is often where the ball is controlled, right? Where the game's controlled. So when you try to go from defense to offense or offense to defense, it's so vital, right? Everybody talks about the importance of offensive midfielders, but in the flip side, those offensive midfielders are picking on those matchups. And that short stick defensive midfield has to be very good. And then they have to be able to get the ball in transition. So there's a lot of things that hinge on how important or the ability of your short stick defensive midfield, along with your pole. Now that's traditionally everybody runs a pole on the faceoffs. Now that's a vital position on the field. If you have a great pole, and I mean, the right kid is obviously a former All-American. He has one skill set that works real well, right? He's more of a beater, bruiser. He's also right-handed, right? So he can cover a different set of guys. Then there's Sam Alexo, who in transition is very deadly. He's bigger, he's longer, kind of more of a hybrid type defenseman, can play down low, can play up top. So when you have those good dynamics going on of those players, and then I guess, like I said, they're really trying to figure out who I think is the 2 bona fide. You have Rice, he's a mainstay. You have a lot of speed, he's a good sized kid. He has some technical flaws, but you can get away with that with just being a good, aggressive, short stick defensive midfielder. And then you have, Levine, then you have Spalina, then you have, the smaller kid, number 19. You have a few guys trying to fill that position. And that is extremely important because that is where the weakness is in most offenses. So if you can make that weakness as strong as it can and make that kind of an advantage for you, you obviously create things. Remember, because defense needs to create offense, right, with the shot clock. So it's an important position within the field. Like I said, the middle of the field is often what is the big winner in the game.
Hey, you mentioned defense into offense, and I remember him being your guy last year. Billy Dwan scored 2 goals against Hobart in transition. Just crazy that he scored the 1, but then the 2, and I think that's now 4 on the year total. And he just won, defensive player of the week in the ACC. What have you seen specifically from Billy Dwan developing from this year into, him and Figueres go back and forth a little bit guarding the number 1. He guarded Brendan O'Neill just because of the size. But what have you seen from him development from freshman to sophomore year?
Well, first of all, I've known Billy since he was in high school, right? His dad, you guys don't know this, but his father, his uncle, his other uncle, his mom, my mother cut their hair. And my mother was actually a little league baseball coach for his brothers because a woman quit. Like my mother was cutting the mother's hair, Mrs. Dwan's hair, and the coach just quit. She's like, I'll do it. Angela Beardsley, boom. Next thing you know, she's there. And, so Billy Dwan, I've watched him when he was being recruited and everybody said he was a number 2 guy, right? Was a number 2, he's a coach's kid. He's big. He wasn't all of a sudden he developed 3 more inches of height. And that, that comes, the Dwans are tall people, right? But the pedigree that he has is not only with his dad and his uncle, who's an All-American at Loyola and is a defensive coordinator at Loyola. It also is his uncle, Rob Dorr, was a defenseman of the year. It's his mom's brother, it's his uncle. So it's like his mom's brothers, they're pretty well developed as defensemen. So he's kind of getting the best advice off the field. But on the field, the one thing he's done a spectacular job with in his growth is, he's one of the only guys in Division I that sits with his hips down off ball. He's always communicating. He's always using his length. He's always putting his stick to the inside. And then that right there, and one thing, the kid, when he showed up his freshman year, his stick skills were very marginal, okay? I remember watching the Michigan scrimmage. It was a close scrimmage. I was lucky enough to watch it last year. And man, I was like, wow, their stick skills of some of these guys are rough. But that's why they recruit them, right? Because they're athletic. They might not need to be as polished. They get polished at that level. And, he's developed his stick skills to become, obviously, and if you're scoring in a Division I lacrosse game, you're kind of an elite stick handler, right? I don't care what anyone says, right? You're pretty good. He's become a guy that has been extremely flexible with what he can play. He can play off ball, he can play on ball, he can play big guys, he can play small guys, right? He's also an extremely great leader, right? Now, the one thing I'm jealous about, because my freshman year, I had 6 goals, and he's already got 3, I believe. We can't have that. We can't have anybody scoring more goals than I did. But yeah, Billy Dwan's growth will just continue. He will be if the season were, I know that IL just put out the mid-season All-Americans, and I have not looked. I saw it for the girls' side. I can tell you that like he deserves to be a second or third teamer, so that's just, where I think he's at. And I think that's tremendous, especially the way Syracuse has been before the year.
So you talked about, the guys on defense, talked about the midfield. How about the guy in goal, Will Mark? How have you seen him working with the defenders in front of him to produce such a successful defense for Coach Adirna in his first season at Syracuse?
I mean, Will Mark, first of all, is a remarkable talent as far as with quick hands. He's agile. He does a lot of good things. In the scrimmages or in the preseason, he wasn't spectacularly on, but I think that was everybody getting accustomed with everybody. I'll tell you right now, his growth as a goalie is spectacular. He's great inside, right? And he's great from the outside. There's very few weak points. He's a tall goalie, so he takes up. Obviously, when he's in a crouch, at 6'2", 6'3", he's still 5'10", 5'11", where most 6-footers take a crouch and they're 5'9", 5'8", and that's a lot to be working with when it comes to shooters that there are at this level. He's an excellent communicator, and he's done a great job blending into that defense. I mean, I think the one thing that they're doing defensively, and which is what most people do that are at that level of coaching, they try to, if they're going to build a defensive philosophy, they build it around the goalie strengths, right? And they've been pushing guys to where the goalie strengths are. And you know what? I never understood that till I got to the PLL. And I had my one short stint in the PLL, and I had Jack Kincannon, who was a goalie from Haas. And you know what? He gave up the most 3-point goals in the history of the PLL for a goalie. But he has the most saves within 5 yards. So we tried to design a defense, which is crazy, that would, if anything, not give up any threes, but we were willing to give up stuff inside. So weird. But it was off the charts with the percentages. And it wasn't like it was like, hey, he gives up 50% from the outside, and inside he gives up 55, saves 55. It was like he saves 90 from inside. It was like that much. And in that game, you guys are in the sports business, and you will be when you're older. Analytics plays a big part in the way a lot of people will develop game plans in every sport. So that's what, Will Mark is they're certainly very good.
You mentioned the game plans, and that kind of brings it to the biggest difference per se in terms of the defense from last year to this year being the defensive coordinator. What has John O'Dearna brought to the unit where now they're executing, in games like against Duke, comparative to Dave Petramala?
I think he's dumbed it down. If you know Petro, he's a complex. He's had complex schemes where it's ever changing when the ball moves, right? So meaning the ball can go down a right alley, push forward to X, and then bang off on the left. And in that transition, that if that goes down that alley and goes to X, your slide package, depending on what flattens out on the backside, could change. It's that complicated. I think O'Dearna, he's done a great job in making it simpler. He's doing some complex things if you've watched, but he's making it just simple. And simple with a little bit of flair works out pretty well when you have great athletes.
I think that probably helps Gary and coach and the rest of his staff a lot, because it makes their life easier knowing there's not all these different things going on. So I was at the Duke game. I went as a fan. I was sitting in the third row. And aside from watching the game, the thing that fascinated me the most was just watching Gary and him just standing there, arms crossed, just taking it all in as Pat March is yelling his head off at the offense, as O'Dearna's coaching up the defense. How unique is Gary's coaching style, where he's, this stoic, just standing there, super calm, and letting the rest of his staff do the actual, yelling and coaching?
Well, if you look at a guy that was there at the helm for a long time, he had long white hair, he had gut, was about 6'2", except this guy wore a hat all the time and a lot cheaper items on his body. I can tell you right now, Gary Gates' pants are not cheap. Those blue pants he has on them, I guarantee those are $300 pants from some fashion place downtown in Syracuse, Mr. Shop.
He's got probably the best style maybe in the ACC, I would say.
Gary, and he prides himself on that if you know him. I've been very, very lucky to be able to call him a friend for a long time. And our wives are friends, and I coached his son. But, Gary's coaching style is a lot like Coach Simmons Jr. It is noticeably that way. And I love the critics. Like, I used to get friends that his first year, guys, teammates on a text, man, is Gary going to say anything? And then after a while, I just went, guys, doesn't he remind you of someone? And the only reason the guys would say that is not because they all like Gary, they're all friends with Gary on it. They just were wondering. It was not a slight towards him. What it was those guys wanting to win so bad that they know that if they were losing, they'd have to be yelling and screaming or saying something. Whereas Gary, it's a process for him, right? And also the generation, guys, is pretty different. Let's be honest. Nothing against your generation. It's caused by my generation. There's just, you have access to more things, so there's more lacrosse players, right? There's more different kind of personalities in the game. With more people become more complex things you have to do. And yelling and screaming is not one of them. The assistants, everybody knows that assistants in the Division I level are there to do the majority of the lion's share of the work. And they're the grunts, and they earn that, right? And then they earn their head coaching jobs. And then they're supposed to be the CEO of the organization. And Gary is exactly that, is a CEO. But I see him as a Roy Simmons disciple because of just the way he looks. It's an amazing, it's amazing similarity to me, that it's just like that. And if I see a Syracuse flat brimmed, crunched up hat on his head, then and wide whale corduroys in 100-degree weather, then I will know that Gary Gate has fully become Roy Simmons Jr. But that style works for Gary, right? If you know him, that's how he is. He kind of thinks before he speaks. But trust me, he has one of the best minds in the game of lacrosse. He has revolutionized the game, him and his brother Paul. On the women's side, my daughter Angela, who I obviously left and moved a car for, we're very fortunate that Angela's going to Stony Brook and to play for old man Joe Spallina. But her game was pretty good with some stick technology. And then when she got a hold of a gate apex, it was game over for her. So those guys, that came out of their heads. The most, do you know that the STX Stallion padding system, which was the most popular padding system in the world of lacrosse, came out of Gary's head. So there's so many things, guys, that go through that gentleman's brain. So you know what? Let him keep quiet, because as long as he keeps winning, he gets to be like that guy. They say be like Mike, you can be like Roy.
Wow. I did not know everything about the technology side of it. I will say that the style did go away at Hobart in Geneva when it was very cold outside.
Come on. Have you ever, fellas, I played 2 games in Geneva, both rainy, cold days in my career. We had 2 games in the Dome. You did a home and away, right? That was grass back then. It was a mud pit. And it was freezing, and it was that much of a hostile environment. And there were 1-goal games at one point in both of the away games and blowouts in the Dome. So what's that tell you? It was better to be warm than it was to be cold if you were a Syracuse lacrosse player. But those guys got it done and kept the Carl Simmons trophy, which is a very big thing now that coach is older. And he's on the grind for his life here, and that's how that works. And when you get in your 80s, you're there, you're on your grind, and I might not even make it to 70. So, but yeah, that whole I was lucky enough to be watching that from a warm couch in my house. So
yeah, I was lucky enough to be. I was lucky enough to be in the press box, which was heated more than obviously the field being. It felt like 20 degrees down there. But someone that's been hot of late, he didn't do as well against Duke, but Mason Cone and John Mullen at the Faceoff X have really been a change for this team going back to last season. Obviously, when you win more faceoffs, you get more possessions, it helps out your offense, helps out the defense statistically. How much does that impact the mindset of the team, where last year you didn't know how much possessions you were going to get on offense, you were on the field a lot on defense, and this year it's kind of flipped in that sense?
Well, number one, kudos to those two, because I am going to give you the insight of what my brain is like. So I'm only sold on a Division III guy that goes to the Division I level until he proves himself. So everybody can tell me how great a guy is, and then I'm like, yo, proof's in the pudding, because it's a different level of person you're going off against here. I mean, Mason Cone, could be about the most impressive kid that I have seen come through Syracuse University in a long time, coming in as a transfer from a level that, yeah, they're good. Obviously, Tufts is a good team, but if Tufts played Syracuse, probably a 6 or 7 goal loss, right? Or more. But heck, now that you start to watch Mason Cone, do you really think it might be a 6? I don't know. I question myself now. And he's athletic as hell. Forget about him being able to be quick off the draw. He's a big kid. He can score goals. But what's real impressive is watch with his hockey ability, how he maneuvers the ground ball to himself. And that I've seen a bunch of times. And then, Johnny Mullins out of Massachusetts, I know his club coaches quite well. I've seen him a million times at events that I've worked. I've been lucky enough to work those events. That kid hasn't really missed a beat at all. And he's only going to get better. That, you're right. It is very much a great mindset when you can be make it, take it, Jordan. It is very much a mindset that you have. You can take a lot of risks. You can play faster. You're not worried about making mistakes. Because that also, think about it, also goes into game planning, because at the highest level, the margins really of mistakes got to be narrow, and those little margins take you above. And the way lacrosse is with parity, the way the NFL is with parity, the way, the NBA is, the way all these sports are leveling out, now it becomes this one position becomes very important. This number becomes one important, and now people are making their adjustments. It's amazing to hear a guy like me, who's an older gentleman, right? Because I'm 50 years old. I'm a big fan of understanding how analytics work, because I understood percentages, right? So as a defender, I know that if I just come down on a 2-on-1 and I'm the one, and I just let him shoot, he has a higher percentage to hit the goal and score because I'm not doing anything. But if I make him make a pass, that drops his percentage of the play working because that's ball's got to go in the air, make it to him, guy's got to catch it, then the guy's got to hit the goal. So there's a couple things that could happen that are wrong. So he's really narrowed that mistake and that type of that position to where it's become, was it kind of a crutch to where it is completely an advantage. And he's done it against the best, and he's going to get challenged each week moving forward. But man, has he been up to the task? And that duo coming at you, bang, bang, it works out well for you. And obviously look at where Syracuse is, 3 in a bunch of polls, getting the old Baltimore bias and the old, in one of the coaches, in a few polls that I talk about. But the old Baltimore bias is always going to happen for Syracuse because everybody, there's 2 types of people, right? There's those that play lacrosse and there's those that want to play at Syracuse. And it's that simple.
Very fair. Looking at Mason Cone too, what's impressive is when he gets it too, he's not a tall guy, but he's a thicker guy, and he can fend off all the the sticks going for the ball after the faceoff.
Great athlete, and he's only getting better. He's only getting better, guys. I mean, he really is.
And we've talked about this upward trajectory kind of throughout too. Each position also getting better throughout the year, and then you look at the last portion of the season. Venture a mind into the NCAA tour. What is the ceiling kind of for this team? Like, how high can they get based on the trajectory that they're on right now?
I was talking to an ESPN color analyst, okay, or play-by-play yesterday. Outside my house, I drove to Syracuse, as you guys know, watched my daughter Viviana. Shout out to Viv. She had 5 and 8 in her first game. Had a pretty good day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right. And the girl that just left, she went 7-1 against Bridgewater Raritan the other day out of 11 goals. So they're doing okay. But where was I? No, I'm kidding. I would get excited about my children, guys. What do you want me to tell you? You wait when you have them, all right? You'll boast a little bit. No, Syracuse, Maryland, Hopkins, Princeton, Notre Dame, Cornell, right? Duke. Duke, we all talked about it quickly before we started going on the recruiting trail, right? They look a little off these days, right? But very much, I mean, when you guys were out, not the recruiting trail, but you were at the games, I mean, they can easily win a national championship. So there's, does Syracuse have enough to get to Memorial Day weekend? Yes, they do. But do they have enough to win a national championship? There's like 7 guys that could do that. And that's the one thing that I just don't know yet. Now, next year, we're having this conversation. Be a lot more confidence in that because it would be shown, right? A lot of teams are going to lose a lot of guys. Syracuse is going to retain a lot of those guys that, so I think Syracuse, can people say they're back? Is that what you're getting at? Are they back? Yes. I can tell you we're back. I will give us that. And I love every minute of saying that, guys, because was often the harshest critic. I'm one of the only alumni that would speak his mind, especially on the local radio shows. Because to me, being 6 is unacceptable, right? That's an unacceptable ranking, right? That means there's 5 people in front of you. You're not legendary, but getting to those Final Four starts to bring back all the things that Syracuse can need, right? Makes the recruiting trail easier. Okay. Makes me want to be on campus, right? You chose this school for the communications end of it, right? You guys know that when you graduate, it's a factual thing. I am on right now talking to 2 guys that I'll see when I'm 70 years old, somehow on TV somewhere with great jobs. And they will be public figures. You will be. I know that. I went to lunch with Alter the other day. The guy, he was the #1 guy at this school. And I knew who commanded it when I went to do that first game as a color guy with him. So I understood. And you chose that school and you chose Syracuse for a reason, as I did, to win national championships. And more kids now are going to choose it. And it's going to get you back on the schneid and truly become New York's team. Listen, the weather, guys, it is certainly not going to bring people to Syracuse, New York, but everything around it, a good football team, a good, excitement with the football, excitement with Coach Red, my old neighbor in South Campus, All those
Wow.
things, yeah, listen, you guys, I happen to be in that right era of people, right? You had Red, man, I had Glenn Secunda, JB Reef Snyder, Sapola was my next door neighbor when we moved up my senior year. It was, you forget, all of us knew each other. There was one athletic complex. There wasn't football, basketball, everybody else, right? So we shared a locker room with the soccer guys, got to know them. We practiced alongside, we would do aerobics with Megan Kelly. You know her she's a famous, right?
Yeah.
Right, from Fox. Well, Megan Kelly was our aerobics instructor in the Dome. So, guys, that is right. So I know we sidetracked a little bit off on a little side street. I do that often, but I'm going to tell you that
it's a fascinating side street, though. It's a great side street.
It's a little side street. I'm hovering, going, "What's up, guys? I'm over here, but I'm still talking to you. Don't worry. I'm not going to get off the exit quite yet, but I'm next to you." But yeah, that's why people choose Syracuse University. Okay, because of their specific things that they want. Excellent communication school, excellent athletic school, right? And those are the things. So Syracuse, yes. Are they back? I think they are. And I'm hoping they stay because I love Gary. He's a longtime friend, so, and I think they will, the biggest piece of that puzzle, guys, honestly, I don't think gets enough credit is when Joey Spallina committed to Syracuse, a lot came along with him, man. And that's why I never understood that people would get after the kid because, he went 1 for 14 his first game. They don't understand how much better he makes the place, right? You also have to remember he beat up, man. He gets beat up every day.
Yeah.
And that kid still comes to compete. So, kudos to him, but that's what we got there. Can they make it to the Final Four? Can they win a title? I'm not sure about the title end of it, but boy, it's anybody's game when you get there.
2 months from now, we'll have an answer. And we always appreciate your honesty, Rick. I got one more question for you. I want you to get a little introspective. So I know you always give it.
Let me look that up on my glossary on my PC.
So you're always giving your honest opinions, positive or negative, about lacrosse and the X's and O's and all these different things. When did you fall in love with lacrosse, and what made you fall in love with the sport?
You are crushing the questions because I say so much about how you have to be obsessed with the game in order to be great at it or to love it and want to have it part of your life for so long. And obviously being obsessed with the game, you have to have skill, you have to have all those things to get to that level. But first thing is first, you are right. The obsession to love it, that maximizes you as a person. Man, that is I'm just thinking about how I can formulate it in words. Let me just put it this way. I write scouting reports for my daughter's high school team on scrimmages. That's how much I love the game. I'm willing to drive an hour and a half on Saturday to a different part of New Jersey to scout a team just so they have information on them and miss my own daughter's game because I know that scrimmage they're going to have, she'll be fine. It's a scrimmage. But to gather information, you have to love this game in order to be great at it. And I've loved it so many different times. I've hated it and I've loved it. My first time I loved it. It's tough to remember. It's a long time ago. I've been hit with a lot of sticks. I think my 7th grade year when I was at Lakeland and I was playing freshman lacrosse in 7th grade, and I was a midfielder. And I was a defenseman growing up. That's all I was. That first stick was a long stick. That's what it was. My mother wouldn't give me a short stick like everybody else. And my mother, was from New Rochelle, New York, and she was a tough gang chick, and she was a tough little Italian lady. And I remember I went to Sports Barn and they said, we'll give him a short stick. No, he's going to be a defenseman. Why give him a short stick? I don't understand this. Like, he's going to play defense, give him that stick. Well, it's maybe a little, who cares? Give him that stick. I'm a hairdresser. Would you give me, I'm going to go get paper shears, you know, from the drugstore. Like, when I got to my freshman year and I picked up a short stick and I like loved it. And then I picked up my long stick and like the love came out. And then my freshman year, when I started on varsity with so many older guys, and I realized I could be pretty good at this, right? I wasn't just a big angry guy that swung at guys. Like, I could be pretty good at this. And then I fell in love with it. Oh, did I fall in love with it? Man, Carolina, Syracuse in the Dome, my first game, I'm running the ball down. Dude, something simple, clearing the ball. And I heard the roar of the crowd and I had such a high. And I can honestly tell you real things looking dead at this guy. I've never done a drug. And if that's what like heroin or crack or any of those is like, I would have been an addict. It was the greatest feeling. You know, and I'll be honest, like winning a national championship, those are great. Those are great highs. They're not the biggest highs I ever had. You know what I mean? Not the biggest highs I ever had. I can tell you that. Biggest highs have just been watching other guys score goals, watching guys, you know, do some great things. But I fell in love with that game several times. And then the game is, you know, then I coached it and then I watch it with my kids. And I'm still a guy who will go to a high school game, still a guy that will go downstairs in this rental and pop on, you know, Quinnipiac versus Manhattan College.
What a game that was too, by the way.
Yeah, and no skin in the game for me there, except knowing both of the coaches and some, you know, and some players I've coached, but no skin in the game when it comes to that. And I 100% like absolutely just love every minute of this game. Like you guys love every minute of what you're doing.
Well, that is a perfect way to close things out. Rick, can't thank you enough for your honesty, and your free will to always share everything with us. We really appreciate your
You
time.
mean by long-windedness?
No, no.